And welcome to this week's episode of the UFO Show over on the Area 51 Sports Network, brought to you by bet99.com. If you head over to area51sportsnetwork.com/betting, there's a link there. If you click that link, you get up to $600 depending on what you deposit into the site as an added bonus, so make sure to check that out. Today we do have a very special guest, Gord Randall, here to talk some football. So Gord, how are you doing today?
Good, guys. Thanks for having me on again. It's great to be back.
Yeah, I think that the last time we had you on, we were discussing the MLB trade deadline and what the Colorado Rockies were going to do.
Yeah, my B team. I'm a Jays fan first and foremost, but decided I had to have a National League team and pick the Rockies just as they were going off a cliff. So the answer to what the Rockies did at the deadline was absolutely nothing because they're dumb. So
now, I don't know. Personally, I think they might have a chance at re-signing their free agents they didn't trade.
You know, somebody suggested, I saw an article from, I think, one of the Rockies beat guys the other day, like asking in earnest whether Story would be back in a Rockies uniform. And I was like, I have a really hard time seeing that, but okay.
Now,
I don't know. It depends on the CBA, I guess, right? If Fano gets a DH, I think he's gone for sure.
Yeah. He's not a bad fielder at shortstop, though. So I just think that eventually those teams, like the teams like the Yankees that are sitting there going, we'll play the market out and see where it goes. Like eventually those guys, like it's the New York Yankees, they're gonna go out and fill the very obvious hole that they have in their lineup. Lieber Torres is not going to be the starting shortstop for the New York Yankees on opening day. They can't run that out again and expect to be a contender. You know, whether it's Story or like Carlos Correa, I think is still unsigned too. Like one of those big guys is going to go to New York. Detroit's probably going to pick up the other one. I don't know. I have a hard time seeing Trevor Story go back to Colorado, especially since he essentially asked them, like he said, I've been a good soldier, but if you wouldn't mind trading me, like he had to take the game off the day after the trade deadline because he was so because he was so upset that he hadn't been traded, and he just had to he was so shocked that he was still in Denver that he was like, I need to process this. Like, I don't understand. I don't see how that guy possibly comes back to Denver after something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how many zeros are at the end of the check they write him. But yeah, I tend to agree. I think he's probably gone.
Yeah, for sure. And they have very little to go on until Zach Bean arrives, and that's a couple years down the road. So
yeah.
Now we're gonna talk some football. But before we do, since we're on the baseball topic, are you surprised that the Atlanta Braves walked away with the championship without one of their biggest stars?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think they had the worst record of the playoff teams. I know for a fact that the Blue Jays had a better record than them and did not make the playoffs. And then Atlanta goes on a run and makes it. And not only did they not have Acuna, nobody misses the fact that Ronald Acuna was out. But don't forget, they also were without arguably their best starting pitcher that whole season in Mike Soroka from Calgary, who tore his Achilles and was done for the entire year. Rewind, a year and a half, and Mike Soroka is their 23-year-old blossoming ace who's rolling with a sub-3 ERA in the Cy Young conversation, and then he gets hurt, tries to come back, has a setback. So they didn't have him either and still managed to win it all. I mean, that I imagine that luxury, right? Like every other team has to have everything break right for them to win it. The Braves, after years of looking like they could win it and not being able to get over the top, I guess the magic elixir was losing their best pitcher and their best player. So who knows? But I'm interested. Like the Braves are an interesting case because like Freddie Freeman, you're talking about free agents who are surprisingly still sitting out there. Freddie Freeman's still sitting out there, and there's a guy kind of the opposite of Story where I think everybody felt that it was set in stone that he was just going to go back to Atlanta, and yet it sounds like there's starting to be a little bit of grumbling out of his camp that he hasn't seen the offer he expected yet. So that's an interesting situation to watch as well.
And it was a little bit it was great to watch the Houston Astros just lose again in the World Series. I think that most people can agree with that one.
Yeah. I mean, the Astros transgressions outweigh the tomahawk chop, but it sucks watching the Braves because there's a lot to like about that organization, and the one thing that they do that still makes you go, like, just this isn't necessary. I know it used to be fun and it's become a part of your thing, but like now people are like, the general consensus is that those things are not appropriate anymore. And when you're holding on to them at this point in fall of 2021 now into 2022, you're basically saying I hear what you're saying and I don't care. And so that doesn't quite sit right with me watching 60,000 Braves fans gleefully doing tomahawk chops in between every inning. Plus, it's annoying as all hell, I should point out too. But other than that, though, like Canadian Alice Anthopoulos, the ex-Jays GM is their general manager. There's a bunch of familiar faces if you grew up a Jays fan that are in that organization. He brings back, like, he's given shots to guys like Felix Hernandez on the last legs of his career. There's a lot to like about the current Braves organization. So it was for the most part, I was happy to see them win, certainly above the Astros again.
Yeah, and the other thing too about the Braves is they didn't have a good record when at the trade deadline, right? And they went out and basically got 4 new outfielders for sort of C level prospects, rebuilt their entire outfield and ended up winning, right? I'd like to see more teams, especially in baseball. Like you look at the Cubs, who I like, the Cubs and Braves had the same record. The Cubs decided to trade everybody under the sun, and the Braves did the exact opposite and sort of, made these sort of smarter, calculated moves, like picking up Jock Peterson from the Cubs, and they win the World Series, right? So in terms of, like you said, Gord, building things and a lot of good things the organization does, I agree. And it is very unfortunate that they, don't come out and condone a pretty racist gesture that their fans make.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're seeing in baseball with the recent expansion of the playoffs into that 5th team in each league, I think some of the organizations are still shifting their thinking to a 10-team playoff model. So what the Braves had is they had the luxury of having a division where they didn't really have a powerhouse in that division, right? So even though their record overall wasn't that great, they're in a division with the Mets, the Marlins, the Phillies, and the Nationals. Well, the Nationals bottomed out this year. The Marlins were crappy yet again. 2 organizations that you thought would maybe put it together better than they had. The Mets had some splashy acquisitions, but it still, like, and they're working on still making some more splashy acquisitions, but it didn't quite coalesce for them. And then the Phillies always seem to be a couple pieces away. So everybody, like, if I remember correctly at the trade deadline, that entire division was within 3 games of each other. Like they were really tight. It was totally up for grabs. And so kudos to Alice Anthopoulos for being the one of those 5 that looked at that and was like, well, yeah, I don't think our club's in the ideal situation right now, but at the same time, like, if I can go chase a playoff spot and then see what happens, I'm gonna go chase a playoff spot and see what happens. And you talked about Jock Peterson, Jorge Soler worked out gangbusters for them too. Like, he hit on some of those gambles that he took, and so good for him.
Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
so let's jump into the football here on because we do have one of the we have a special weekend coming up. Not only do we have extra games, because of we have buys going on this week, but we actually have a Monday nighter. So let's jump into the Raiders versus Cincinnati. So Cincinnati is minus 230 right now at home. I think if they win, it would be the first time since 1990 that they've won a playoff game. The Raiders are coming off of that emotional playoff win, or not playoff win, but win in the last in overtime to make the playoffs. Is this a slam dunk for the Bengals, or do you see the Raiders pulling an upset here?
I'm very much on the Bengals bandwagon for this game, and one of the matchups that I like the most is that receiving core the Bengals have versus the secondary that the Chargers have. I got mixed up that game last weekend. The Raiders secondary, you've got a washed up Cam Hayward at one corner. You've got a nobody at the other corner. One of their safeties, Trayvon Moehrig, is a rookie this year, actually has played quite well, but the other safety, again, is just kind of a warm body type of guy. And so that is a weakness in the Raiders defense, which is matching up with, I would say, probably the biggest strength on the entire Bengals team, right? And so you look at that Bengals offense, and you've got a ton of star power at all the skill positions, a pretty mediocre offensive line. So if the Raiders are going to stay in this, it's going to have to be from guys like Max Crosby up front, creating pressure and causing havoc in the Bengals backfield. That is the opportunity the Raiders have there. But I just think that it's going to be too much for the Raiders in the back end to put caps on this Bengals offense.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, the one thing I think the Raiders can do is get after the quarterback, because I don't like the Bengals offensive line. But, if Joe Burrow gets even, slightly below average protection, I think he's going to shred the secondary. So this one is a 5.5 point favorite. I would be taking Bengals minus 5.5 in this game.
Yeah, I feel comfortable even with a fairly decent sized spread here. Like, I feel comfortable projecting the Bengals as like 7 to 10 point victors in this, maybe even more.
So we'll jump over to I think this is probably the most one of the highly anticipated games of the weekend, the New England Patriots and Buffalo Bills. So this is taking place in Buffalo. As many people know, the New England Patriots have owned the Buffalo Bills for years. A lot of that had to do with Tom Brady. But even after Brady left, the Patriots still were rolling. Bills did win the division, though, and they're at minus 200 right now on the money line, minus 4 for the spread. This game should be interesting because even though Buffalo is even though Buffalo is a good team and they play in the cold weather all the time, they're not necessarily a good team in the cold weather. And we saw the Patriots, when Mac Jones threw 3 passes a few weeks ago and they beat the Patriots beat the Bills, that Bill Belichick knows how to shut down this Bills team. So what is your thoughts going into this game?
Look, I think that Bill Belichick's going to put together an excellent game plan. And one thing the Bills have shown this year, I think, is that you can never predict what you're going to get out of the Bills. They've put, and I guess that's true of the vast majority of the NFL, if we're being honest. But, the Bills have put some truly putrid performances out there this year, but have also put on performances that make you believe that they're a legitimate championship contender even. So it's hard to know exactly what you're going to get out of the Bills. But I will point out that, the Bills and the Pats being in the same division, they played twice this year. The second time they played, the Bills won handily. That other time that you were referring to, not only so much was it cold, and it was cold, but remember, like, it was like the tail end of some hurricane or tropical storm or something like that was coming through, and it was like, gale force winds blowing through the stadium at all times, which is really what took the air out of the ball there. And that is, like, if you happen to get weather conditions that are that inclement again, then that's a problem for the Bills, because they just have not had that effective a running game. Like, they had a stretch this year where their most effective running back was the washed up corpse of Matt Breida, right? So if this comes down to a ground and pound run it out game where the Bills can't throw anything effectively, then yes, I think the Patriots have a good chance. But I just don't, that's not a likely scenario. So if I'm picking this head up, I do like the Bills to win this. But I will say I would be shocked if Bill Belichick doesn't make it a really tight affair.
Yeah, I kind of feel the opposite here, Gord. I'm just looking at the forecast. It's supposed to be minus 12 and winds of up to 20 kilometers, gusts up to 50 kilometers an hour. So kind of like when they played last time. I think it was on Thursday night a few weeks ago, minus the snow. And if you look at Josh Allen, I think his career high for games where the weather is 0 degrees or below is 203 passing yards. Patriots on a plus money line here. They're plus 170 to win. I'd take that all day simply because I think Belichick's just going to run the ball 60 times and dare Josh Allen to throw his team back into it.
Yeah, and Damian Harris is healthy. Ramondre Stevenson, I believe, is still up in the air a little bit for this game. That may affect the Pats running attack a little bit, but it ultimately will come down to whether the Bills are going to be able to air the ball out at all effectively. And look, we're talking about Bill Belichick as a defensive game planning savant. Let's not sleep on Sean McDermott, who's also a defensive guy himself. He's seen this Patriots offense twice already this year. He's going to be a guy that's going to have a solid game plan in place too. So one of the reasons I think people are so hyped up about this is in a lot of ways there's strength meeting strength in these two teams, and so it sets up for a good competitive matchup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. This is my game of the week of all the wild card games.
Yeah, I even heard the problem with the wild card game is that you get a lot of these dud games that they call, but then you once in a while you do get these rivalry games that are sure to really pump up the crowd. I'm sure that the fans in Buffalo are going to be really excited for this one. They're going to. I'm sure the smash table per 60 rate is going to be off the charts. So we'll see what happens here. But yeah, if we've learned anything, it's don't bet against Belichick. Really.
Yeah, lots of natty lights going down in upstate New York this weekend.
That's right.
Okay, so we'll jump here. Buccaneers, Eagles, minus 375 for the Bucks, plus 300 for the Eagles. The line is at 8 at the moment. I think this is pretty self-explanatory that the Bucks are going to win this game, and they're probably going to cover the spread very easily.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm putting money down on the money line, I just don't generally touch games that have this much of a spread. I'm just not getting enough bang for my buck. But yeah, if we're playing, and I'm seeing about an 8.5 point spread right now, pretty sizable spread. I am on board with you there, Adam. I think that the Bucks are going to cover this. I think the Eagles are kind of just happy to be here at this point in time. I know having a couple of fairly close friends who are Eagles fans, they're just happy to be here at this point. And so if you look at the Eagles offense, it's all pretty good for the most part, but not great, right? Devontae Smith has upgraded their receiving core from one of the worst in the league to merely mediocre. Miles Sanders is a good running back, but not great. The offensive line is good, but not great. Jalen Hurts has the ability to do some damage with his feet and make some throws, but he hasn't shown the ability to put out a great performance here. And when you're looking for upsets on Wild Card Weekend, you're looking for teams that have guys that can make those big game-defining plays, and the Eagles just don't really have a lot of those. And even Devontae Smith, as talented as he is, he hasn't really been a guy that has blown the top off of defenses this year or made those game-changing plays that can really flip games on their head. And so I think that's kind of what the Eagles are lacking when I'm looking for a team that can go and win a wild card game on the road. I just don't see it. And it's purely because that kind of lack of not just star power. It doesn't need to be a relatable name necessarily, but those guys that can make those explosion plays that just completely change the face of a game.
Yeah, no, I agree with Gord. This game's the least interesting game of the week to me. I don't see how the Buccaneers can lose this, to be honest.
So a rivalry for historic NFL rivalry, they're not playing in the same division, but 49ers at the Cowboys. Cowboys are at minus 165 and they're at minus 3 on the money line. This, I think, is the biggest potential for an upset this week.
You beat me to it. This is my upset special of the week. When the matchups came out, I immediately was like 49ers. And not to take away from the Cowboys, they've had an excellent season. Their defense is more talented than it has been in 5 years at this point in time. Dak Prescott's coming to his own, and his receiving core is more or less healthy. They lost Michael Gallup, but his big two guys are healthy. And so the Cowboys look every part the Super Bowl contender, and yet again there hasn't really been a lot to move the needle for me for the Cowboys. They look like they've got all the pieces, but it just hasn't been super convincing. And what I see on the other side with the San Francisco 49ers is I see a team that has underachieved its true talent level. And I know that sounds a little bit weird talking about a playoff team, and a playoff team that I should point out that made it, by a full game, despite playing in the hardest division in football. But, the 49ers, if you look at their roster top to bottom, that is one of the most talented rosters in the entire NFL. And whether you're of the opinion that it's just the quarterback position in general that's holding them back, whether you're of the opinion that, Kyle Shanahan is maybe hit or miss in terms of his ability to game plan, which I think maybe both of those are kind of a factor. I think that the 49ers are a team, comparing them to the Philadelphia Eagles, for example, they are a team that does have those guys that can change games, right? Deebo Samuel is a guy that can change games. If you get the right matchup, George Kittle's a guy that can change games. And let's not forget Brandon Ayuk, who, people kind of forgot about, especially the fantasy people, because he got mothballed for the first 5-6 weeks of the season for reasons. And yet that's a supremely talented guy in the 49ers attack too. And the thing that Garoppolo's generally done down the stretch is he's limited those big mistakes that really killed him. And then you get over to the defensive side of the ball, and again, still one of the more talented defensive fronts that you're going to see in the league. Eric Armstead, Nick Bosa up front are studs. They've got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. So this is my upset special of the week, and if for no other reason than the fact that I don't want to be that guy that picks the favorites for everything. So I'm slamming the plus 135 I'm seeing and the 3-point spread. I'm slamming both of those for the 49ers this week.
Well, the good news, Gord, is that on Bet99, 49ers are plus 145 on the money line and plus 3
more even.
Plus 100. So, you make some good points. I think this game is kind of a pick 'em, and it comes down who has the better quarterback. And in that case, I'll take Prescott. So I like Dallas minus 165 on this one.
Now, with this game, what are the odds that you think we'll see Trey Lance make an appearance or make a substantial appearance in this game?
Basically zero. Where you may see him pop in, you may see some sort of a sub package with him popping in. The one thing that he has shown this year in the limited action he has is that he can potentially bring a different dynamic on the ground. If I were Kyle Shanahan, I'd probably be cooking up some sort of short to mid yardage package with him where, you get a 6-7 yard chunk on first down, and here comes Trey Lance, more than a true short yardage package, which is like 1.5 yards. Give him something in the more mid-range with some short, quick passing stuff, easy reads in the passing game, maybe some RPO type stuff where he can get his legs involved as well, or just simply run some quarterback power because he is a big physical boy who can move. So you could potentially see a role like that for him, but in terms of playing legitimate quarterback, unless Garoppolo had that hand or wrist issue a couple weeks ago, unless something like that happens to flare up, I wouldn't count on seeing Trey Lance in any significant capacity.
Yeah.
And what a flop that pick was, by the way. Like,
yeah.
It's truly, I was talking about how talented this Niners roster is. Like, they get everything they deserve when they have as good of a roster as they did. They were one quarterback away. They do the right thing. They package picks. They go up to get the franchise quarterback, and they pick the guy who every expert said was a year to 2 years away. Come on. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that Eagles fans feel the same way when they did with Carson Wentz as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that if you go back to that, but I mean, the Eagles fans are laughing on the other side of that because they managed to get a pretty good haul out of Carson Wentz giving him to the Colts.
Yeah.
only for him to do Eagles things when it mattered most for the Colts. So
I'm sure that, even if there was a 7th round pick, it might be too much for Carson Wentz at this point.
And instead it was 16th overall or 15th overall.
Yeah.
So, yeah. A game that features a local kid here, Pittsburgh at KC. 11.5 points favorites at the moment for KC. This is going to be Pittsburgh's quarterback's last game of his career. I honestly, I was listening to his comments Ben's comments this week about how his team has no chance. And if I'm Mike Tomlin, I know that he's not going to do this, but I would just say, you know what, you put on this team, we're putting in the backup quarterback at this point. Like, why would you reward somebody who has come out in the media and said, who first off can't throw the ball, is not mobile at all, and has said that your team has no chance?
Well, I mean, the answer to that is pretty simple. It's that they don't have anything else. When Roethlisberger was hurt, was that last season or 2 seasons ago, and Mason Rudolph was carrying the load, he was awful. Duck Hodges is now in the CFL, by the way. And then the other guy who's still on there, I think he's practice roster most weeks, is Dwayne Haskins. Remember him? But you need to have a viable alternative that can give you some sort of upside. And as washed up as Ben Roethlisberger is right now, they just don't have that other guy. And Ben has done so much for the city of Pittsburgh that, yeah, it would be such a difficult decision optics wise, despite the fact that the comments from Roethlisberger, I think he intended them like that typical, oh, everybody's sleeping on us and nobody believes in us and all that kind of stuff. The stuff that Alabama was trying to pull before the national title game in college. But it kind of came out a little bit more harsh than that. But I don't know that he's going to go that far in that direction. I mean, I gotta be honest with you guys. Like, Andy, you said that the Eagles game was the least interesting of the weekend for you. This one is by far the least interesting of the weekend for me. And for that reason alone was why I was rooting for the tie on Sunday night, because the last thing I want to do is watch Ben Roethlisberger just throw a bunch of checkdowns all day and hope that they take it to the house. Now, the Kansas City secondary isn't their strength, to put it lightly. Riley Thornson's still playing in this game, so that technically means the Steelers have a chance. But there's not enough strength on this Steelers offense to do what they need to do. So, like, for me, the most compelling part of this game is to see which of Juju Smith or Jackson Mahomes has the better TikTok routine on the sideline, because the game itself, I don't think, is going to be interesting at all.
Yeah, I kind of disagree a little bit with you, Gord. I think the reason I find this game interesting is you have TJ Watt, who's probably Defensive Player of the Year, going up against Patrick Mahomes. I fully expect the Chiefs to win by probably 10 points at least. But I do think that Watt is going to cause some problems for Mahomes, and I think it'll be a closer game, into the second half than most people think. Like, I don't think we're going to see a 42-10 win for Kansas City or anything like that.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll necessarily blow the doors off of them. I could see Kansas City pulling away late, but I definitely see this being more of a 28 to 31 point output for the Chiefs rather than getting up into the 40s. But the thing is, I have a really hard time seeing the Pittsburgh offense piece that together on the other side, right? And that's where it's not interesting to me, is not so much that there aren't individual matchups that aren't interesting, but that I just don't see the potential for the actual football game to be that compelling in the end.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right, is that Pittsburgh, I mean, Roethlisberger's got no arm. They basically have to control the clock, and if they get 20 points, hope that their defense holds on, right? And 5 years of this has shown that you can't really do that against the Chiefs.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I just, maybe, who knows? We just saw Eric Weddle come out of retirement. Maybe they can convince a guy like Phillip Rivers to, sign a contract or something. But, you don't win games when you average, 2.7 yards a pass over 25 passes. Well, there was that stupid statistic that came out the last couple weeks ago about the Steelers play. Like, you don't win games like that, especially against KC.
And their offensive line has been better this year than it was last year, but it still hasn't been good. And the strength of the Chiefs' defense, in my opinion, is their defensive line. They can push the pocket. Chris Jones is up there, very good player in the interior. Frank Clark's had a down year statistically, but he can get after the passer. And like Najee Harris on the ground, they're gonna have to lean on him a lot in Pittsburgh. He's shown flashes of his talent, but I was looking at a stat the other day, and in terms of expected production versus workload, he's one of the worst in the NFL this season. And that's not his fault. It's largely because of what's in front of him, and largely because, defenses are able to creep up because they know that Ben just can't put it over the top anymore. So, if the Steelers are going to make a game of this, Deontay Johnson's going to have to be a stud. Chase Claypool is going to have to make some plays over the top, and Ben's going to have to figure out how to get the ball out there to those guys, because that's the way that they'll be able to stay in this. And I'm not holding my breath for that to happen.
Yeah. Okay. So the big one on the West Coast this week, the closest line that we actually have, the LA Rams versus Arizona Cardinals. So this is in LA. The Cardinals have been slipping lately, but the Rams are favorites at minus 190 with a 4-point spread. Do you think the Cardinals can get it together in time?
I was really tempted to call upset special on this one when it first came out too, because I wasn't particularly impressed, nor have I been over the last number of weeks from the Rams either. But the Cardinals, as you alluded to, Adam, like they've played 500 ball the second half of the season. And I watched them play the Seahawks last weekend because being a Seahawks fan is one of my many curses. And the offensive line that Arizona's trotting out there right now, you look at the amount of pressure that Seattle was able to generate against them, they're going to get themselves killed this weekend if that's the type of performance they put out there. I'm a big Aaron Donald fan, and he alone is going to create such huge havoc for that offense. And there's a lot of guys on that Rams roster that have the ability to take advantage when he creates that chaos in the middle of the pocket and clean things up. Don't forget, Von Miller's there now. Dante Fowler's still kicking around. They've got Leonard Floyd, I think, is still kicking around there too. They've got some guys that can get after it. And because they're always single teams, because everybody has to pay so much attention to Donald, it provides some opportunities for those guys to really wreak havoc as well. On the other side, Sean McVay is hit and miss, right? It feels like there are some teams in the league that have kind of figured him out, and Arizona's seen him as much as anybody. But I just think that there's as long as Stafford doesn't make those backbreaking decisions that he has seemed to have a bit of a tendency towards in the last month or so, they should be fine. And you were talking about the likely defensive MVP in the last game. The guy for my money who's the NFL MVP this year is Cooper Kupp. And that guy alone is worth the price of admission. The other thing to think about with the Cardinals too, and this is why I would take the Rams even giving 4 points as I'm seeing on the line right now. The other thing about the Cardinals, J.J. Watt looks like he's trying to make a go of it, but Chandler Jones has been a shell of his past self this year since being injured last year, and DeAndre Hopkins is still out, it appears, for them too. So those are some really big names to replace for Arizona, and since Hopkins and Watt have been out, it's clearly just not been the same team at all. And so I like the Rams for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good detailed description. I like the Rams. To be honest, I'm kind of scared for Kyler Murray right now. I don't think he's still 100% healthy. And like you said, when you have Fowler and Miller and Aaron Donald coming at you, Murray's not the biggest guy around. I genuinely hope he doesn't get hurt, because I think he's going to be hit 25, 30 times this game.
Yeah, I mean, if you watched any of that game last weekend and you saw, how Carlos Dunlap was living in their backfield, Darrell Taylor was all over him all day, even Kerry Hyder was getting in the backfield for the Seahawks, and those are names that I'm very much familiar with as a Seahawks fan, but I would say your average casual NFL fan might recognize Dunlap, and that's it. They're not slouches, but they're not what you're going to see on the Rams front by any means, and they had a field day last weekend. So I don't like the form that the Cardinals are in right now. And I think, unfortunately for them, matchup wise, where they're weakest also happens to be where the Rams are strongest. And that's not typically a recipe for success.
Yeah. Well, especially without DeAndre Hopkins, right? Zach Ertz is kind of a shell of himself. Rondale Moore is still a rookie. First of all, if Kyler can, I
hate the way they've used Rondale Moore this year too. I thought they could have, especially once Hopkins went out. It seems like they've really put him into that box as that fly sweep gadget guy, and watching his college tape, he's much more than that. He looks like that guy, but he can do much more than that. And yet Cliff Kingsbury hasn't really seemed to figure out that he can. And so it comes down to this offense that, and I will give it, Ertz has actually played pretty well over the last 3 or 4 games, but, and aging Zach Ertz and Christian Kirk are now your go-to guys on that offense. And that's just not the kind of firepower that they need,
Well, for sure, right? And, the Rams secondary, they have some injuries, but they're not a horrible secondary. I mean, I think Jalen Ramsey's an overrated player, but he's still pretty good on the outside, right? And I just don't know where Murray's going to throw the ball if he even has time.
Well, and the other factor to talk about too is they're banged up in the backfield too, right? Chase Edmonds didn't play the last couple weeks. I haven't seen his final status for Monday, and because it's the Monday game, I don't think they've even actually released that yet. But he's up in the air. James Conner took a hit and left early in the Seahawks game, and I was watching it live again, as I was saying before. It sure looked like a cracked rib to me. The circumstances in which he went off. So even if he plays, he's gonna be sore, and so you wonder whether they'll be able to establish an effective running game like they need to kind of balance out that attack either. And so you're talking about the amount of hits that Kyler Murray's can take. If he's going to have to drop back and try and throw 50 times, that's not going to help his cause either.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, that will wrap up. What are they calling it? Super Wild Card Weekend here. It gets started on
Make us
Saturday.
more money weekend.
Yes, exactly. They get started on Saturday morning, and then they end off on Monday night. One thing I will say is that I was very surprised that the Bills-Patriots game was not the Monday nighter.
Yeah, I was too. Or the late Sunday game at least. I know Mahomes is the ex MVP and the big superstar there, but I was a little surprised that they put that as the Saturday night game instead of the Sunday. But if you look at the schedule, the way it's laid out, it's pretty balanced with the way that they've laid out the star power. They've got probably the best matchup of the weekend, Saturday night. The late game Sunday is the star power in that storyline of potentially Roethlisberger's last game, and then the Monday nighter is another divisional battle between arguably this year's MVP in my opinion, and then what a guy that's supposed to be one of the league's ascendant stars on the other side. So I do understand why they scheduled it the way they did, but I know I wouldn't have put the Steelers and Chiefs as my late game Sunday night, as you could probably tell by the way I described it earlier in the show.
Yeah. But I guess there are smarter people than us making these decisions somewhere. They're probably looking at the LA market and saying that we need as many eyes on this Monday night game as possible, so we're putting it in LA. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Thank you very much, Gord, for joining us this week. I know that personally, I've enjoyed the college football previews that you've been doing over the past couple weeks for, doing write-ups for each bowl game, highlighting big Canadians. So before we go, who are a couple of the big Canadians to watch in the NFL draft that will be happening, I guess, in March, right?
I think it's April that they're pushing it back to. So probably the two names to keep an eye for that will be the biggest Canadian names in the draft. The first one's John Mechie, officially John Mechie the third. If you watch much college football this year, you probably heard the name. He was Alabama's kind of 1B guy. I would hesitate to call him their number 2 guy, but along with Jameson Williams, he was one of their big receiver weapons this year. Almost 1,200 yards receiving, was having a great SEC championship game, and then just before the half went to plant, crumpled on the turf, torn ACL. He has still declared for the draft. He's still expected to go. I'm seeing most projections, at least right now, we're a few months out, but I'm seeing most projections put him as a day 2 guy somewhere in the round 2-3 area. And that's despite the fact that he'll probably miss the beginning of next season. Worth noting, I should point out too, his running mate Jameson Williams did the exact same thing in the national championship game. So a little bit of an ACL curse for Alabama this year. So Mechie is a guy to watch. And if you're a CFL fan, you might recognize the name Mechie. Royce Mechie, playing for, I believe he's with the Stampeders right now, is his older brother. They're from Brampton, Ontario. And then the other guy to watch out for is Jesse Lukita. He's a edge rusher / I like him better as an off-ball linebacker myself, but another guy who, if somebody really likes him, he may go in day 2. I think he probably will fall to early day 3, so the round 4 area. And the reason for that is he's still kind of emerging as a pass rusher, doesn't have a real go-to pass rush move. I think he only recorded a sack or a sack and a half officially in his career. And what Penn State did was he was playing at off-ball linebacker until his last season, and then they moved him up and tried to put his hand in the dirt. I wasn't a huge fan of that move, but that's how he's being evaluated. He will go somewhere in the draft, and he's a very good athlete. I think he's a guy that could be a better NFLer than he was a college guy, even. But he's a guy to watch out for, too. So that's the 2 guys to watch out for: John Mechie, the 3rd, receiver out of Alabama, and Jesse Lukita, linebacker out of Penn State.
Yeah, it should be exciting. We do have quite a few Canadians in the playoffs this year, so that's always exciting to watch. Before we go, do you want to shout out where people can find you these days now that the college football season is wrapping up?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you will see some sporadic stuff from our show. So our show is Crown Gridiron Nation. That's Crown with a K. So if you want to find us on socials, it's at KGN on TSN. And keep an eye on that. We will update you and be putting out various content throughout the spring. Obviously, our heavy season's in the fall when college ball is going, and that's pretty much over now. But we're gonna stay visible as much as possible when there's relevant stuff to talk about. And then myself personally, you can find me on Twitter's my engine of choice at GA Randall, Randall. So you can keep an eye on both of those places if you want to stay up to date where we're focusing on Canadian guys playing college football, whether it's on the Division I teams in the States or here at home with the Canadian university teams. If you're a CFL person, we're a great follow because you can find out about the next generation of CFL guys before they even hit the field. And if you're an NFL person, we're a great follow because you can know which guys are worth cheering for on Sundays. So,
well, thank you once again. Thank you to Andy once again for joining us, or my co-host Andy here. And thanks to Gord. This has been the Area 51 UFO Show, sponsored by Bet99.com, and we'll talk to you guys again next week.